Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you. G'day legends, and welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. In today's episode, James and I are going to be sitting down to discuss with you all some of the action that has recently unfolded across some of our adventures. As many of you would know, the Red Deer Roar is on, and James and I have been trying to find a big old mature stag. Yet on our bow hunts as of late, we have also been running into a number of other redcoats. With an abundance of blackberries and rabbits in the local area that we're hunting, the local fox and feral cat population has well and truly exploded. Catch all the latest today as we undertake some predator control with our bows. We will conclude the show, as always, with some of your listener FAQs, which have been sent in. If you have a question for us, please email us at info@twinelements.com.au with the subject line FAQ, and James and I will strive to get back to you. Or you can send us a DM on Instagram through either Twin Elements, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors. We will jump into the podcast. Huntingful is the foremost hunting resource with varied levels of membership to get you on your next adventure. If you've seen some of our recent USA-based adventures, and that's got you thinking about a hunt of your own, then listen up. Whether it be an eagerness towards planning annual trips, or you're more time poor and want to plan towards a bigger, once-in-a-lifetime adventure, you're in the right place. Huntingful and the consultancy team will cater to your needs regardless of your desired hunt. James and I have been utilising their services for a couple of years now, and virtually all of our USA adventures are shaped by the guidance of our friends, the Huntingful advisors. Not sure where to start when planning a USA hunt? No problem. Not sure how to apply for tags? No dramas. Simply set a budget and have a general idea of what species you want to hunt, and the team at Huntingful will start narrowing the hunt to your preferences. If you're interested in using Huntingful's license application services to draw more tags across the Western United States, then email applications@huntingful.com and start the conversation today. Mention Twin Elements to get 25% off your first year of service. The Huntingful team will take it from there. Rightio, so picking up where we left off last week, as you would have heard in that episode, the rut is well and truly on. The red deer stags are roaring. We've been in amongst plenty of action and had some really close encounters, which has been absolutely amazing. Seen plenty of nice red stags. But what we also have come across is plenty of foxes. Nearly every morning, whether we're stalking a gully system or sitting up on an elevated ridge looking over, a blackberry-choked gully, we have seen a number of foxes, and that actually got us to consider basically, when the middle of the day is on, you got that little bit of lull in the red deer activity, knowing that they're more active at dawn and dusk. We decided to take that opportunity and try and whistle in a few foxes, and we have had some amazing success. Again, with most of our strategy for this trip being to try and get James a nice mature red stag, I've been behind the camera and James has had the bow. So although it's been a bit of a team work sort of exercise, a mix between calling and shooting and whatnot, James has been the one that's, drawing back the bow, setting the sights, and has had some awesome success on these introduced predators. What we're going to do is just talk about a few of the benefits, obviously, of predator control. So for those that don't know, red foxes and feral cats are introduced to Australia. Obviously, feral cats in a domestic setting, we obviously know and recognise them as pets. But the second they're released or living out in the wild without any human intervention and control, both feral cats and foxes just wreak havoc on our native wildlife, consuming birds, small mammals, reptiles, you name it, all the way through to like insects and things like that. They just, absolutely devastate our native wildlife, responsible for killing millions of native animals each and every year. And then when you add to that the fact that, even from where we're recording this podcast, there's a neighbour's paddock just across there with some lambs in it. They obviously go and, especially when considering the foxes, wreak havoc on lambs, eating those, and then that contributes to stock losses and production losses, which obviously the farmers and landowners sort of feel. So there is a big, I guess, outcry from some of these local farmers. Whenever we sort of get onto a property, a lot of them want us to try and target the foxes, whether they've got chicken stock, like we said, with lambs, or they just recognise that they're not good for the environment. So we're going to do our best and have done over the last week or so. So what we're going to do is jump into a little bit of story time now, and James can sort of lead us off with some of these more memorable stalks.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the place that we're on is just inundated with foxes and feral cats, purely because there's just so many rabbits. Like they actually had an area that the farm was telling me where they first bought the place back in the 80s, that they recognised that it was easy to actually get the dozer in there and then just like drive and just flatten the whole area, because there was just warrens like everywhere and they just couldn't get the rabbits under control because there was so many. So they just like flattened to the area, they reckon. But if that just paints a picture of just like how many rabbits there are, and obviously from that, so many feral cats and so many foxes. So we've really been taking advantage of them and putting the hurt back on the foxes population, especially. I think we're up to 8 or 9 now for about a week and a bit of hunting. And that was a couple of big days, especially where, we'd finished on the reds a bit earlier. It was a bit hotter that day, and we went out and did a heap of fox whistling. And I think we whistled in. We shot 4 for the day, missed another 2 maybe, and whistled in another 2 or 3 maybe. In probably 3 or 4 hours. So super action packed. And I think probably the most memorable one was actually not a whistling one, but I'd shot a large sow earlier in the trip, and we were driving past and actually saw a fox like that we must have been leaving the carcass, and we ended up stopping and going back. And just with the really strong winds we've been having at the moment, I was able to sneak into about 30 meters and shoot that fox as it was leaving the carcass. And then as I was walking over to pick that one up, I actually noticed another one walking in on the carcass. And knelt down, quickly put an arrow on the string, and that one walked into about 20 meters and looked at the other fox, the carcass of the first fox, and then sent the Koga pilot cut straight through its chest, and it ran about 20 meters as well. So just a wicked little hunt, and it's been really good confidence boosting, I guess, for me, because calling in these foxes, it's a very similar repeatable process to calling in that massive red stag that we're hoping to call in, but not to say there's less pressure, but it's not, you get so many more opportunities. So especially at the start, I'll acknowledge I probably was a little bit rusty on the whistle because it had been a fair while, but within 1 or 2 encounters, we're able to really capitalize on the foxes.
Yeah, going back to those first couple of scenarios, it was really evident in our minds. We like to think that we know what's going to happen, and we set up with the wind in our face perfectly. And if you can imagine a clock face, say we're the middle of the clock and we're calling out, and we've got a gully lined up in the 12 to 6 sort of orientation, and we're in the middle of the clock. Most of the time you think they're going to come sort of anywhere between 10 and probably 2. You think they're going to run down towards you, but so often the case in these scenarios, we noticed that the foxes were coming from like 7 or 4, and you're sitting there going, that's virtually nearly downwind. How is this thing not smelt us? But all you hear is like a stick break at like 12 meters, and you're trying to silently and very stealthily sort of turn around and just see what with the corner of your eye, like what it is. But these foxes were just desperate to come in, and even though a few times we'd think, they're going to come down this gully, and often they did, but the second or third fox would come in from somewhere completely unanticipated. So it just pays. Like, one thing and a big tip that I would recommend is just constantly have your head on a swivel. And secondly, when you get to a spot that you want to call from, I think it's clear and really important to just clear a bit of brush around where you're standing. So say you're standing at the base of a tree, they've often got a lot of leaves and fallen timber from years and years of, the canopy falling down. Just try and excavate a little bit of a like pad for your feet to stand, and somewhere that if a fox comes from your 7 o'clock and you've got to turn around and sort of rotate your hips to the left just to get a shot off, you can do that silently and without moving too much, because the difference between breaking a tiny stick at 15 meters where a lot of these, fox whistles end up in a close encounter can be the difference between, a fox on the ground or being unsuccessful.
Yeah, and I think picking the right locations as well. Like, I was probably a bit haphazard where I was just, this spot will do at the start, and I've got the wind in my face, and we're normally trying to pick spots where we're whistling down, so they're running up. But yeah, trying to pick spots where there wasn't actually like an obstruction or something. Like, I remember the first spot we actually did it at, there was a branch sort of on my left-hand side that was coming down from the tree that sort of blocked vision until a fox was at 20 meters or whatever. And so the fox had come in, like what Ayden had said, instead of coming in at that 12 o'clock, like straight down the middle, it'd come from like a sort of, 8 o'clock angle, and pretty much like right where the wind was. And yeah, it came into 10 yards, and I heard like a little twig snap and looked, and then here it is. But its whole travel route in had been concealed. And that's where we sort of worked out, like, as long as you're not moving and like too much, then you can get away with an incredible amount with the foxes. And especially if you keep sort of squeaking and keep them coming in and not sort of looking around too much. And that's where we found like having a bit more visibility became a lot more important, and making sure that we had like good shooting lanes and good options where we can see things coming in became a lot more important, and hence our, success rate dramatically improved after that as well.
Yeah, I definitely think keeping those foxes coming in straight and on a good line, once you get them to commit, there's nothing better than when you start whistling, just seeing a fox like bursting down the hill and their tails almost flipping over the top of their face as they're running through the grass or through the blackberries and whatnot coming your way. But one thing I did notice is that if we sort of were like, oh, yep, this fox is coming in, we'll just, ease off on that whistle so they can sort of come in a bit slower and maybe not pick our location exactly. I noticed that's when the foxes tended to start circling downwind, because it was almost like they're like, maybe my rationale for this is potentially, if we can't hear where the rabbit is anymore, we'll start going downwind so we can smell where it is, because we need to hone in on that location. Whereas I've found that if you get them to commit and you just keep going, and the second they stop, you give them a little squeak again, and it just keeps them coming in on a straight line, it ends up with the fox like directly at your feet. And then once they get into that, for us bow hunters, that 30 meter sort of range, that's when I slow down. And I notice that for those last like 10 meters to get them into within 20 meters, which is sort of what we're mostly trying to shoot these foxes at, I notice that they sort of come in. And then, as I said, as they sort of slow down at about that 15 to 20 meter mark is when they start to turn broadside as if to go downwind. And that's when it presents a nice quartering on shot rather than a front on shot where, some of these foxes are only a couple inches wide and a couple inches deep front on. And especially if they've got their head in the way, it can make shooting them a little bit difficult. Whereas the second they turn that quartering on and give you the shoulder, it makes for a lot better target to shoot at. I have personally used Hoyt bows for over 20 years now. Building the most innovative and technological advanced gear, their carbon bows are the lightest, leanest and most compact on the market. Quite frankly, I treat mine like hell, throwing them around, banging them on rocks and scrub whilst on the hunt. Time and time again, it has performed when I've needed it most. I'm currently running the Carbon RX9 with 80-pound limbs. Even at that weight, it's easy to draw and throw absolute darts. This past year, I've been shooting the best I've ever shot, and a lot of that comes from my confidence in Hoyt. Get serious, get Hoyt. Head to their website to check them out today, or for our Australian listeners, head in store to Venture Hunting and Outdoors. The team not only stock Hoyt, but also have tons of other important archery equipment hanging from their walls. Mention Twin Elements and they will look after you.
Yeah, and I think like another thing was being concerned with how much movement and stuff I could get away with, and being conscious, like the ones that were coming in early from the sides, like having the heaps of visibility really helped, because even if they were coming in from like a 9 o'clock angle or a 4 o'clock angle where they're like super behind, like almost over your left or right shoulder, if you had good visibility and you could at least see them coming from 100 meters, like that gives you time to like shift your feet around and stuff like that. And even if you're like, you know, not perfectly in line with the tree and stuff, at least you've got your bow up, or, you know, the rifle up or whatever, which, you know, you should have like an arrow on the string or a bullet in the chamber ready to go. You should have everything ranged. And like even before, you know, I start whistling, I'm going to range and make sure I know my 20s and 30s all the way around, like even at those obscure angles. Because yeah, as we've worked out and as you'll work out, like, you know, most of the time that's sort of, they're more like, or just as likely to come in at a 10 o'clock angle, like almost behind you, as they are to come in at that directly 12 o'clock angle. Yeah, knowing those ranges, and then you don't really need much, like even when they're coming in and you're whistling and whistling and whistling and they're like running in flat at like 30 and 40 and stuff, like, you know, yeah, I haven't been busted drawing back, especially if you have like control and, you know, the bow's pointed at them almost, like you're not doing like a big like arcing draw where you like, you know, you put the bow up above your head and like drop it in almost and need to like, yeah, like if you just do like a really slow drawback, like I haven't had anything pick me out yet. And yeah, they come running in, and then like Ayden said, like we've sort of just slowed the calling down as they sort of get into that 20-30, and they naturally start sort of looking more, and then that's when they'll just pull themselves up. Like you don't, sometimes like you might give them a little oi or whatever, but because I'm using the hinge, I sort of, yeah, we'd do like a little squeak or something or whatever, but like when you're shooting only 10 or 12 meters, like it, they're sort of fish in a barrel in that sense. And yeah, it's been really good. Like I personally love shooting foxes. Like there's not many things I enjoy hunting more than foxes. And so yeah, when you're able to whistle in 10 in a couple of hours, it's been a super, super fun couple of days.
The next little point I wanted to talk about was more leaning towards when we weren't successful and we were picked out. One thing that's been really interesting observing, especially behind the camera, is just how likely the foxes are to sort of almost look for you. Like they're seeking something a bit more, like they're looking for movement. It's not like they're looking for the rabbit. They're looking for around at the area a bit more, I find. And I discussed this in comparison to feral cats, because we have called in a couple of feral cats this trip as well. And the only way I can really describe it is just that the cats come in and they're not really looking at another predator potentially being in the area. Like if you can whistle in a cat, they generally end in pretty good results. Like we had one come in and again, unfortunately come in from a very obscure angle, so we weren't able to shift around. But it was one of these instances where James was whistling, I saw it to our right, so basically at a 3 o'clock on the clock face, if not even a bit further, around to a 4. And it was, by the time I saw it, it come up over like a rocky outcrop at probably 30 to 40 meters. But the way this thing moved was so calculated. It was almost like when you see a leopard stalking an impala in Africa, and it's got like every foot placement is absolutely perfect. Its tail, shoulders are all moving in alignment, and it's super, super low to the ground. Like this thing, make no mistake about it, was almost stalking whatever this sound was. And in this case, it was like a squeak from James's fox whistle. So it must have been thinking, oh, there's a rabbit there at the base of the tree. And I watched, because all I could move was my eyeballs. I'd try to signify to James by giving him a couple of whistles and like, oi, oi, there's something coming on your right. But he wasn't able to hear because he was blowing his whistle, the whistle. But I basically watched as this cat come into like 15 yards, I'd say, and it didn't even like look up or look around left or right. Like it just sat there almost. To me, it looked like it was looking at James's shoe, like his lower boots, and just going like, I'm hunting that. That's where the noise is coming from, exactly at that tree. Like there's a dead rabbit there or a rabbit that's in distress there. Like I'm hunting. Like it was different to when you see the foxes come in. It's almost like a pet dog where they need constant reassurance and attention and things like that, where you call them in and they come into like 20 or 30 meters and they come absolutely charging in. And then it's almost like they go, oh, what was I here for? And they sort of look around and they almost forget a little bit. And I just find that because they do that a little bit more, they actually end up picking you out a little bit more because they kind of go, oh, there was a rabbit there, but oh, what's that odd shape? And they can kind of see you a little bit. And I just found that really interesting. Like the cat coming in was almost like, yep, I'm going there to kill and get this thing. Whereas the foxes are like, oh, if I can get a rabbit, that would be great. But otherwise, I'll just move off again and keep hunting and catching crickets. And their behaviours were just very, very different. Apologies, we're just experiencing some 20 plus knot winds and it's clambering on all the windows and things. So that's that background noise that you're probably hearing there.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit more than 20 knot winds. I reckon they gust up to 40. It's absolutely blowing its ass off out there. But yeah, another thing that you've got to think about when you're doing this fox whistling. So one of my favorite, so I've got a huge collection of fox whistles. Like I've got, the classic little button whistle, which everyone sort of has and is like tried and tested. And it's a super brilliant sound, but just not very loud. And then the second one, I don't even know what it is, but it's essentially like hard plastic with just like a metal reed in between it. And you sort of bite down on it and blow on it. And it sounds, same thing. It's a little bit louder and sounds really magically like a rabbit or maybe like a mouse or something like that. But the thing about it is it's like probably a 5 inches long thing. So it doesn't like I'll go and explain. Like the next whistle that I really like is the Apex whistle, which we've used heaps and is super successful, except it's bloody loud, like incredibly loud, which is great because it brings foxes in from honestly over like a kilometre away easily. And the thing I really like about the Apex whistle and the little button whistle is that you can if you see a fox that just pops up and it's in your mouth, you can literally just put it in your mouth and then shoot. And it won't affect your jaw position or anything like that too much. Whereas with the big one that I have, you've got to make sure it's out of your mouth when you shoot, because I've actually had it before where I've shot and it's been in my mouth and it literally rips out of your lips, which hurts a shitload. So that's where I've had it a couple of times before where foxes are charging in and I've had to drop it and then they sort of hear it drop out of your mouth and then they sort of pin you. And so I just flap my bino harness down and it is a little bit of movement. But what I do is I normally do the way that I'll sort of whistle is I'll whistle, stop and then give myself a little bit of a break to look around and see and then whistle. And then what we've sort of been doing, it's been really good having Ayden here because when something's 50 meters away or 70 meters away and I'm using that one that's 5 inches long, just say I'll actually take it out of my mouth quickly and chuck it in the bino harness, and then I'll get Ayden to take over and start just squeaking, and so he just with his lips, and then I'm almost mouth and hands free, where I can then just focus on just shooting the fox. And it'd be something that I could easily do by myself without Ayden, but it's just easy because he's got the camera up and he can squeak and then I can just worry about actually shooting it. So that's been really good, but something to just take into account. Maybe having some practice shots or something like that with the whistle actually in your mouth, because it will change your potential jaw position and then hence change your anchor point and hence change how you're actually shooting. But yeah, just something to think about when you're whistling, because shooting with those in your mouth really hurts. And then the final whistle that I've got is a Primos double reed cottontail, which more sounds like a injured sort of cocky or bird, and it's just or a pig even. It's just an absolute wail and super loud whistle. And I find that's more successful. Like in this area, I haven't really used it much, just because the rabbit sort of imitation or rabbit in distress imitating whistles have been so good, because there's obviously thousands of rabbits here. And not to say that I don't think the other one would be good, but it's just those rabbit ones are sort of tried, tested and proven, and get the results that I'm looking for. But ones where there's not a lot of rabbits, yeah, that double reed cottontail can be absolutely deadly, because it sounds like something else just dying and in distress. And it's worked really, really well when the rabbit ones have just like, you'll go and do 5 posts or stands and try and whistle with like even the apex whistle or something that's like super loud and get nothing, and then you'll switch to that, and then you start getting foxes. So just trying to target what food source is available is super important, because there's places out there which, as crazy it sounds, like the density of rabbits is super low, and some foxes may have never even like killed very few rabbits, whereas they may be hunting birds or ducks or pigs or whatever, little piglets like all the time.
Yeah, and that's where definitely the variation in fox whistles is a massive advantage. I can't list the amount of times that during this trip we've basically tried to squeak in a fox just on a random, say we're walking in on some red deer and they're 800 meters away and a fox pops up at 70. Rather than go and try and stalk it, we'll just give it a squeak of the lips and see if it comes in. And if it doesn't, then we'll go up to the next call, which might be that 5-inch long whistle that we use. And if that doesn't work, then we'll try the little button whistle. And if that doesn't work, most of the time we're like, okay, we've tried all of our sort of softer, quieter calls. We're not going to risk it. We'll keep hunting these red deer. But it is amazing having the ability to step up in your calls. And I think it might be worth doing now, but James and I will record each of those sort of 4 or 5 whistles, because even between our lips and vocal calls that we do ourselves, there's a huge variance. And this all comes back to one stalk where James and I had just been roaring to a couple of red deer earlier in the trip. They went out across a big open flat, ducked into this next little bit of thick timber, and we sort of thought, okay, there was no shooter in that mob. We'll basically circle back around, grab the packs and sort of head off looking for other deer. And just as we sort of went to do that, we noticed this fox probably 100, 150 meters away on this open flat. And it was just out in the open, presumably trying to catch crickets. And again, it was a sort of 3/4 grown fox. But James and I, again, not really wanting to get the apex fox whistle out and start, disturbing the deer that we'd just watched and sort of put to bed in that thick stuff, we thought, we'll just start off with the squeak of the lips. And honestly, this thing was nearly deaf to the point where it could definitely hear our calls. Like, it picked its head up and looked our way, but it just put its head straight back down in that long grass and was looking for the crickets. So it just goes to show, we try to step it up. We did that. We then jumped to the button whistle. We then tried the little, what I call the 5-inch sort of harmonica. It looks like a little harmonica that you'd put in your pocket. It's this little rectangular thing. Makes a great little noise, but it's not super loud, but it does sound quite effective like a rabbit. That didn't work. And then James was ready to give up on it. And I just said, here, let me try this other squeak. And it's effectively a squeak of your lips, but I do it on the palm of my hand. And I just find that I can get a higher pitch sort of vocalization and a few more like thrills in the range of that squeak. So rather than just going like, where it's like up, down, that you'd normally do just unassisted with your lips. I find that by doing, and what I do, the process of sort of achieving this sound is I'll wet the palm of my hand with a bit of saliva or a finger or something like that, press my lips against it, and then create basically little pockets of air and either suck or sort of blow. I can't even think of how to do it, but it creates this really high pitch sort of noise. Which I'll show here in a second. But this fox, upon hearing that, literally it had ignored us for probably 3 or 4 minutes. It just picked its head up and come charging right in. And James, I think, shot it in the end. This thing was that determined to get to us. It crossed 2 fences, come in through a bit of deadfall, and then, James shot it at 10 yards and it went 20, if that. But it just goes to show, like, that fox, if you're a hunter out there and go, I've got my apex fox whistle, then great. You're probably going to get 70% of foxes in your area. But if there's that 30% of foxes that don't like the apex or aren't interested in, that sound, then you're sort of cutting yourself short by adding in all these other whistles. And especially when they're only tiny little things that you can just fit in your binocular harness or on a neck lanyard that you then chuck in your pack. It really does add to your versatility and help be a bit more effective when whistling in these foxes. Bringing target precision to hunting camp, Option Archery makes specialist hunting gear. Their quivalizers are one of our favourite bits of kit. You would have seen us running these for the past few years across all of our adventures, whether in Australia or abroad. The quivalizer is an extremely unique 2-in-1 stabilizer combined arrow quiver, cutting weight with its clever 2-in-1 design. Their option sights are versatile in this regard also, offering both single or multi-pin sight housings within the same sight. I run the Option 4S sight. That's one single pin sight paired with the 3 fixed pin options within the sight housing. As currently constructed, I can easily shoot 20, 30, 40 or 50 metres with the fixed pins present, or simply flip them out of the way and utilise a single pin slider. My slider allows me to shoot from 20 all the way out to 80 if desired and covers absolutely every scenario. Have a bedded elk at 60 and need the single pin clarity? Use that option. Have a red stag running into a hind call and not sure where he'll pull up? Use a multi-pin sight and be covered from 5 to 50 metres. We love these incredible products from Option Archery and know you will too. Shop their products today by checking out their website. So for this next exercise, what we'll do is we'll start off with our level 1, which we commonly just do as, like if there was a fox popped up in front of me, I'm going through a gully and I wasn't really set up for a fox whistle. I notice a tree to my left, 2 meters away. I'll just get to that tree as a good bit of cover, keeping my eye on the foxes not to disturb it. And what I'd then do is probably just try a squeak of the lips. So this is something that it might sound like. That's very easy. It's almost like you're blowing a kiss and then just, squeaking. For the next one, it'll either be, depending on where we are and sort of rabbit density, would probably be the button whistle.
So I'll try not to blow the mic out with this one, but it... You're probably getting a bit of reverberation from me just blowing straight through that button whistle and picking that up. But yeah, you would have got the sound. So, but still, anyone that's like most people would have experienced a button whistle in some degree, and the sound itself is brilliant. Like I said earlier, it's probably just a little bit quiet, and I think like you probably only get, well, honestly, maybe 100, 150, maybe 200 meters even on like a still day. You got to think like time of the day as well. Like if it's the middle of the day, most of these foxes are going to be like in a blackberry bush or in a log. If you've got a heap of wind like we have today, like you'd probably be flat out getting 50 meters today with how windy it is. So yeah, just those louder whistles, that's honestly why I think they have more success. Like they all sound very similar. It's probably just the degree of loudness and hence how far they're projected.
The great thing about that button whistle there is it's probably the size of a 20-cent coin, if not a 50-cent coin. So it's so easy to just have in a pocket, on a lanyard, in your bino harness, you name it. And it's just super easy. As James said earlier, you can just pop it in your mouth, basically between your teeth and your lips. And it's similar to the squeak that we did earlier, where you're basically just pushing air through that little hole of the button whistle.
Yeah, I just keep all these in the front little pouch of my Ebley stock bino harness because it just, like they fit in there perfectly. And I've only got 4 here, but like at one stage I had 6 and I've just sort of progressively lost them. But I think like having multiple different whistles definitely improves your success, especially on those sort of, like what Ayden was saying, like you're following the food sources or those sort of stubborn foxes. Like you get ones that just sit there and look at you at 200 and then you chuck a different whistle and you're like, oh yeah, okay, cool. It's like a dinner bell. That's what I want over there. You know what I mean? So yeah, this one's the sort of, now looking at it, it's probably only 4 inches, but it's just, some, I guess like a hard piece of sort of plastic, I guess. And then there's like a little metal reed in the middle of it. We just bite down and sort of the air going across it makes the perfect sound. But I'll chuck this in, demonstrate it. And it's just that next level up of loudness, but similar. You're imitating like a rabbit in distress or maybe a mouse or something like that. So yeah, that's probably like sound wise one of my favorite whistles. I reckon I probably get like 200 to 300 meters out of it, and it just, I don't know, especially for bringing in cats. Like it just seems to be the one that I've had the most success with. Had a couple of a fair few feral cats and shot a fair few off it, and just seems to work. Perfectly. Like just get these foxes like absolutely thumping in. That right degree of loudness too. Like I should say, most of the time when I whistle, I'll do that, and then I'll sort of move up another 200-300 meters. This is mainly when I'm like, sometimes you're just walking out after a morning hunt and you see a good spot and you set up. Then I'll usually do that whistle first, followed by like an apex where you project it louder. But if I'm out here just purely fox whistling for the afternoon, what I'll typically do is I'll sort of do that and then move 200 or 300 meters, find another good spot, do another whistle, 200 or 300 meters, do another whistle, and then after that I'll sort of follow it up with the apex. Whereas if I'm just doing a setting up and doing one whistle, I'll normally start with that, because I have had foxes literally run out of blackberry bushes at like 50. Like you set up and you start whistling, and you watch a fox run out of a blackberry bush at 50 meters. You're like, holy shit! So that's where normally it's a bit easier with that one. I'll just do almost what you've just heard, and then I'll stop and I'll be like looking around, and that's for the fox that like runs out of a blackberry bush or a log like right at your feet and you're pretty much ready to shoot it. And then I'll stop and then I'll actually do like a longer sequence of calls.
So with that call, I've been really impressed with just the consistent sort of noise that you get from it. I do find that sometimes when you're squeaking, say your lips are dry, you've just done a big march up a hill or whatever it may be, especially sometimes when it's cold and you can't get much moisture in your mouth, that when you're doing a squeak, or even sometimes I find the button whistle a little bit tinny and sometimes a little bit quiet, and it doesn't quite peak and get that really high pitched noise. That little harmonica sort of whistle that James has just been playing there and talking about has really been great, and especially for that repeated effort of let's do a whistle, we're walking this ridge line, we're assuming that because there's blackberries, rabbits, that there's going to be foxes and cats up here. Let's give ourselves the best opportunity to have as many encounters as possible. And that's sort of been achieved really well by us on this trip, especially that day where we went and did a bit of a midday session on one particular ridge. We just got the wind as best as we could and would basically bounce 200 meters from left, right, up, down this ridge. And it was really interesting where you're probably sitting there at a point going, okay, guaranteed everything within 200 meters is running into this call. It just sounds too good. But I reckon there's a few foxes that are between 200 meters and maybe 300, 400 meters, even on the higher end of that sort of vocal range, that are hearing it, but they're maybe a little bit too far away to sort of commit. And the analogy I'll give here is like if the ice cream truck drives down your street and you hear that tune playing and you're kind of hearing it and you're like, oh yeah, cool, the ice cream truck's coming. If it comes and drives and parks out front of your house, you're probably going to go and buy your kids an ice cream. But if you hear it drive down your street and then turn around and sort of drive and you're on a bit of a block and you notice that the ice cream truck's actually in the next street, you're not going to probably go and walk 300-400 meters out to the ice cream truck with your kids to buy an ice cream. There's sort of a bit of a convenience aspect to it. And that's where I think by going and setting up and whistling and giving a spot its due justice and diligence, really trying to get everything that you can within that 200-300 meter range to you so that you can have a shot at opportunity on them, doing what you will once you've got a fox or busted them, but then following it up and just moving that next 200 meters up and whistling again to potentially new /foxes that have heard it but are now within 100 meters. You end up just getting this whole better experience where, again, for the other day, we would have called in over 10 foxes, I'd say. And some of them, just with how quickly they came in, I reckon we're at the end of that vocalization from the previous set. But then the fact that we moved there and moved up another 200 meters, they were right there ready to come in at 100 and we were basically able to shoot them straight away because they'd sort of been listening to us earlier.
Yeah, they were almost primed. And I reckon and I've had other people that reckon, I don't know if it's just because we can't like we think the whistle's louder than what it actually is. Or they're just lazy, like what Ayden said. But I've certainly had it where so many times where you move that little bit forward, and then all of a sudden it's just like boom, and then there's a fox, and it's almost like you've got them primed from the previous spot. So that sort of 200 to 300 I find the sweet spot. If I'm using the apex whistle, I might go a little bit more just because it is significantly louder. But that 200 to 300 I find is, and it's just cruisy hunting. Like you sort of do a stand. I'll probably give it its time. Like I'll probably go do about 10 minutes on that spot, and then move to the next one. And obviously, because you're not really stalking, you can sort of just walk up there, set up, range everything, arrow on the string, release aid ready, and start whistling with your head on a swivel. This next whistle is the Apex. So that's, more of like a tenor field sort of whistle, with the smaller hole on the top and then a bigger hole on the bottom. So I'll just demonstrate that for you guys I'll move a fair way back and try not to blow the speakers out. So that probably sounds a lot rougher in the mic than what it actually is. Like when I actually took my headphones off, like, because I got Ayden to do it first because it sounded rough to my ears. And like the mic picks up a lot of that, like shh, like that. But then when you actually don't have the mic on, like you can't hear any of that. Like that's just because it's blowing into a mic that's, probably 12 inches away from the whistle. So that's the Apex whistle, which has probably been overall, I think, the deadliest whistle that we've ever used. And we've had it for probably 10 years now. Been using it for a long, long time. And like I said, I think it's just that loudness, and it's repeatable, it's loud, and you just draw foxes in from kilometers away. I think it's just, they hear it, and anything that is hungry within that whole valley system comes running. So that, has been a really good whistle. The next one's the double reed cottontail, which I mentioned sounds like more of a, I've used it to call in boars, or imitate rutting boars and stuff, and had pigs come in. I know the guys up at Cayuga Adventures use them a lot for that as well, which you can probably hear in a second. But I've also used it really, really well on foxes, whether it's, it sounds like a bird in distress or just a piglet in distress or just something suffering. It sounds rough, and it gets the results as well. It's really loud. So I'll jump back and play that one for you guys. So as you can hear, like a fair bit more sort of raspy, I guess, and just like you're probably doing the same like highs and lows and stuff like a rabbit, but it's just meant to, I don't know, like imitate a bird or a cocky or something, just getting absolutely smoked, and obviously just meant to draw them in like a dinner bell, and a brilliant one when there's not as many rabbits around. I've had some really good success sort of out west and stuff in more open saltbush country or like improved pastures, where they don't have as many rabbits. That whistle's just reign supreme compared to the rest of them. But I think it is important to have like a heap of different whistles. I know a couple of other mates that have like little handheld squeak ones and stuff, so they can actually hold it in their hand and squeak with their front hand while they've got the release aid on, and do that because they can't squeak as well or can't squeak as loud. So there's plenty of different options. But just having like multiple different whistles, I find that a fair while ago now I started doing it, and it did just work for those. Bringing in like sort of having a larger menu for the foxes, just had them, you appealing to more foxes and also projecting it loudly to more foxes, and hence got more in and were able to capitalize and take out more foxes. So definitely a top tip there.
Ever dreamed about hunting chital deer? Well, you need to know about spotted safaris. Embark on an unforgettable journey with our fully guided chital deer hunts, catering to both rifle and bow hunters. Spotted Safaris is conducted in the heart of the Basalt Wall region, North Queensland, Australia. We specialise in catering to all experience and fitness levels of our clients. providing trophy chital stag hunts as well as beginner-focused adventures and meat hunts. With over 15 years' experience bow hunting chital deer, our guides know these animals and the grounds they hunt like the back of their hands. With opportunities to also hunt infamous basalt boars, experience spectacular wildlife viewing and stunning scenery whilst on tour, there really is something for everyone at Spotted Safaris. Inquire today by emailing spottedsafaris@hotmail.com or simply jump online, find them on Instagram or Facebook and send them a DM to start the conversation today. A dream chital stag hunt is closer than you might think. One thing we haven't really touched on is what happens when all the calling goes and fails, I guess, and when things don't quite go to plan. And this is a perfect example here and something that just comes to mind. And it's our only cat that we've got of the trip on the deck, thanks to some good shooting from James and some awesome footage. When you guys get to see this, you'll see an arrow zip through this black cat, and yeah, they don't go far when they've been hit with the pilot cut and the bleeders, which is great for small game, especially when we're sort of surrounded by so many blackberries and fallen logs and that type of stuff. And we were able to retrieve this black cat, but the actual hunt for it was a little bit different to most of these other calling situations. We were sitting off a wallow. Again, James had the bow, and we're hoping that because it had been a bit of a warmer day, we got there into the afternoon and found this nice little gully with a really good wallow, had some great sign around it. We were anticipating that as the evening drew closer, a nice mature red stag would hopefully come down and freshen up some scent. But what eventually ended up happening after, to be honest, quite a anticlimactic, bit of a quiet afternoon, I noticed down below us in the same gully, just on the edge of our wind, that there was this black little object coming out of a blackberry bush. And initially I thought it was just like a magpie or a bird or something like that. But very quickly I saw its long curved tail coming over its back. And there's that sort of walk that cats do where it's a bit of a strut / sort of prowl. And anyway, I whispered to James that there was this black cat, and straight away we're thinking, beautiful, we're on here where we've got the elevation, as we discussed earlier, like the topography was to our advantage. We had enough good cover, but it was open enough that we could see this cat. The other thing is that we'd identified it before, we even had to call. And then we had the options of going, okay, do we try a squeak? Do we try, the 5-inch harmonica? Do we try the silver with the fox whistle? What do we go through? And we elected, because we were waiting for deer, to start off pretty, discreet. And we just started off with a squeak of the lips. And this is one of those instances where that cat 100% heard us. It stopped, sat on its bum, and literally looked up towards us. And it did that for about a minute or so while we let out a few little squeaks here and there. And we, again, because it was just sitting and not moving, we knew it had our attention, but we didn't keep calling. It was just a few squeaks, let it get a little bit disinterested, start up a really high-pitched squeak again and just see if that would elicit some sort of response. When that failed, we upgraded to the next weapon, to the next whistle, and then did a few notes of that. The cat wasn't interested. Did another round on the next whistle. The cat wasn't interested. And after 2 or 3 rounds of different whistles, we very quickly worked out that this cat wasn't going to come into a whistle. So there was no point, blowing the place up with an apex whistle. It was definitely in range of our vocalizations. It just wasn't hungry and hunting for rabbits. So what we ended up doing was James and I dropped in there. We dropped our packs, and from where we were sitting ambushing that wallow, we ended up sneaking in for a closer stalk.
And it was pretty loud going, to be honest. Like we've had some really rough weather up here in the last couple of months. So the amount of deadfall and trees down is just significantly more than usual. So it was pretty crunchy underfoot. Luckily, we did have a bit of a wind, and the cat was like, I don't know, when you actually see a cat first, like what Ayden was saying earlier, like they're very in tune, but they're almost not, because they're predators. And I mean, I know a fox is too, but they're almost not used to being hunted. They're very aware, but they generally don't like sort of pick you up, or if they do, they're not like, oh, that's something that's trying to, hurt me, and then they run away.
Yeah, there's sort of almost like an arrogance to them, Similar. I've experienced similar with dingoes when shooting them for property owners in North Queensland and stuff like that. Like a dingo very rarely looks around to its left, right, and is assessing like, oh, is something coming in to hunt me? And one of their biggest, I guess, advantages and why we don't get many dingoes when we're trying to cull them is that they just move so quick. And trying to get in front of a dingo is one of the hardest parts. But James and I, as bow hunters, and that's maybe another difference here, is because we're good at stalking and sneaking in, once we find, for example, a dingo or a cat, I actually feel very, very confident I'll be able to shoot it as long as it doesn't disappear into like a fallen log or a blackberry bush. And we had both of those instances nearly happen on this encounter.
Yeah, so as we were moving in, it actually was sitting there, and we just sort of let it lose interest, and then we're sitting there looking into the blackberry bush, and a little superb blue wren or something like that must have just got too close, and we actually, I'm not sure if Ayden got it on film, but it did this big dive like straight into the blackberry bush, and I was like, perfect. So sort of bit of commotion there, and was able to sneak a few steps, and we're trying to sneak in from probably 80 meters, I'd say, and yeah, because it was so loud, like it then just started walking on this trail, and it's sort of walking but sort of smelling things and taking its sweet time, which was great for me because it was so crunchy. So I'm sort of sneaking in. Ayden's, drifting back just to give me a bit of room because it is so loud. And the cat actually ended up hearing me and then sort of stopped for a second again. And then for this unlucky cat, I mean, it could have gone right and followed the path, or what actually happened was it sort of went left and jumped up on this big fallen log, which was hollow, and started walking on a bit of an angle. Not much of an angle, but a bit of an angle towards me. But the point was, because it was still at the same distance, it meant that it went behind a tree and sort of gave me a few seconds and hence a few steps. And then it was sort of coming in towards me and ended up getting in about 25 meters and drew back. And I gave some squeaks and Ayden gave some squeaks because as I was settling the pin, he got to the end of the log and actually started it looked like it was about to jump down and jump into the log. And so, yeah, gave a few squeaks and it, popped his head up again as if to say, oh no, what's happening here? And it was able to settle the pin. I'm actually loving the option 4 side at the moment, having come from a single pin, and I really enjoyed that for a long time, but having the option 4 sight, Ayden and I were actually talking about it the other day, like even when we're whistling foxes and stuff like that, I've got those 3 pins set up. So it's, my 20, 30, 40, and then 50, the slider I've actually set to 50. So walking around, it's like fully set. And then, if I want to flip it out for when I'm doing a whistle and just have it set to 20, I can do that. But I roughly estimated this cat to be like 25 meters. And it was quartering on. So pretty much put the 20 meter pin on the top of its back and put the 30 meter pin on the bottom of its chest and went, oh, this is going to be absolutely perfect. And sent the old pilot cut day 6 straight through its chest, and you just hear this massive whack. And I swear this cat, probably jumped a good 1.5 feet, 2 foot in the air and did this big meow. And then, it does this mad dash heading towards the blackberry bush and sort of, just stayed on the trail and blacked out before it even got there. So it probably made it about 30 meters after the shot, which was perfect, and had to go travel. Oh, it took a fair while trying to find the arrow. That's been probably part of the problem, shooting the razor sharp pilot cuts through these foxes and cats. Like you're often having to walk a fair way afterwards to try and go pick them up, especially in the mountains. On a downhill angle. So we spent a bit of time, but finally found it. And it was great to capitalize on a cat. Like Ayden was saying, we've had one other one come in, but they do they're like the number one biggest detriment or problem that we have with native wildlife losses. So it was great to get one on the deck.
Yeah, I feel like I'd probably rather shoot one cat compared to like 5 foxes. I just think they're so cunning, and as bow hunters and people that are outdoorsy and go out hunting a lot, we often see, little tiny cat prints on game trails, or you see the odd dead bird and the feathers scattered around water holes and things like that. But you very rarely actually see and get to witness cats. Like, they're out there, there's plenty of sign that they're out there, but they're just so cunning and sort of secretive. Whereas a fox, like they're a lot more naive and probably bold, and it does make them a little bit easier to hunt, I feel. So I feel like being able to get that cat on the deck was nearly just as good as if a red stag had have come in and used that wallow. So it was a great way to cap off the afternoon and a lot of our predator control over the last week, which has been absolutely amazing. As James said, it's just probably the best thing about the bow is that you can do this. You can shoot a fox, at 20 yards, go over and grab your arrow, which is 10 yards past it, and then keep going in on that roaring stag. Whereas I know I've got mates that have sent me videos hundreds of times where there's got a roaring stag 200 meters in front of them. They're using the rifle and a fox walks past at 20 and they just have to sit there and watch it disappear into the bush. And you think, oh, geez, I wish I could have done something there to help, thin those numbers out and help the Australian wildlife. So it has been really good turning our attention to a little bit of predator control.
When you spend your days pushing ridgelines, side-hilling in the dark, and crossing country that doesn't forgive mistakes, your boots aren't just gear, they're your foundation. That's why I run the Lower Ranger GTX 3s. Handcrafted leather, a rock-solid Vibram sole, and full Gore-Tex waterproofing that actually holds up when the weather turns. These boots break in quick, stay comfortable under weight, and give you the support you need when the mountain starts fighting back. If you want a boot for real miles in real country, check out the Lower Ranger GTX 3s. Jump on the Lower website today to order a pair and use code TWINELEMENTS10 to get 10% off your order.
Rightio, guys, it is that section of the show where we are going to sit down and do the FAQ segment. If you have any questions for either James or myself following this podcast, then please send us an email with the subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au. We have been getting a heap of rut-related questions with how to call red deer, how to call fallow bucks, and just different tips and strategy regarding the rut. So we've been appreciating everyone's submissions. If you also just want to send us a message or any general chat, please do so via the social media accounts we have. We're pretty active on Twin Elements, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors. But do give us a little bit of leeway, especially over the next sort of few weeks as we're out hunting the rut ourselves. As always, we'll strive to answer your questions as quickly as possible and get them featured on the next episode of the podcast. So similar to what we were talking about a little bit earlier where I brought up dingoes, today's first question has been sent in by Paul Marshall. He says, "Hi mate, awesome footage of that dingo. What are your thoughts on killing them? I personally would not shoot one." So just for a bit of context, we have recently put up a reel of a dingo in the New South Wales hills sitting off a wallaby or kangaroo carcass, and there are 2 feral pigs currently munching on it. So this is posted as a reel on the Twin Elements account. It's some awesome content and just, again, showcases a sort of, I guess, situation or scenario that probably happens quite commonly in the bush, but it's just one of those ones that we rarely get to witness. And in this case, James was privileged to witness and record and obviously be able to then share that with the greater audience. But we have hunted dingoes, wild dogs, whatever you want to call them. It does vary for us quite a lot depending on the actual state and the actual area or region or land use that the dingo is living. So for example, in Victoria, in the high country, if they're on public land and there's no private land anywhere near them, then that to me is a different scenario than if you're in North Queensland where I do the guided chitaldeer hunts and there's a dingo on private property and it's killing calves. Same again for if you're in Victoria on private property, say you're on a bit of fringe country and there are dingoes living in public land or parks that they're not really being controlled, and then there are big packs of 4 or 5 dogs coming down onto private property every night and killing 1 or 2 lambs or sheep, even young calves, then that's obviously going to be a problem just in terms of landowner wildlife sort of conflicts. So we I must say that as I've got older, as I've sort of hunted more, I don't really like killing dingoes. I have read quite a bit of literature, which there is some evidence that suggests that dingoes eat both foxes and feral cats. And I think that's more of a territorial thing with the foxes. But dingoes are quite opportunistic. They are apex predators. So as well as they eat kangaroos and most other things, if they can catch something, then I'm sure they're going to eat it. So if they're doing that service and similar to what we're doing about that population control, and it's one or two dingoes not really leaving an effect on the landowner's, stock and production animals, then I'm fine to leave them. And quite honestly, even on my guided chittle hunts up at Spotted Safaris in North Queensland, if we're on properties and the property owners say, yeah, we don't really mind the dogs or the dingoes, then I'll leave them. If we're on another property and that property owner says, hey, mate, we've just done a round of mustering and a lot of the calves have bites on their sort of tail ends near their hamstrings, or their ears are ripped, then I'll obviously oblige and start thinning out a few of the dingoes. So it just goes with, I think, any sort of game management or animal management. Treat certain things as, either if it's a feral animal, say as a rabbit, fox, pig, cat, then most of the time they're declared as a pest. There's not too many people that want them around. Deer become a bit more of a challenge because in some places they're regarded as game animals. In some places they're regarded as a bit of a resource where people make a lot of money off them from having them there, whether it's through hunting safaris or they purely enjoy the tourism side and getting people out to look at them. Or just the leisure side of it's nice seeing 5 red deer in your paddock every day compared to 100 fallow does. So like any of these animals that we're discussing, I think there needs to be a robust sort of conversation about dingoes. Recently, particularly in Victoria, I've seen lots of instances where dingoes are getting a bad rap because they're leaving public land where there's not really much being done about them because they're obviously registered as like a native animal, have that historical significance, but then they're not being regulated in national park and public land, and then they're going out in big groups of, say, 5+ animals in a pack and going and slaughtering and killing sheep and things like that. And then that's obviously going to sort of create outrage in local landowners, and then you get this us versus them mentality and things just never really end well for wildlife. So I really appreciate your question there. I'm sure James has something to add as well, because again, all of these topics I think need to just be robustly managed, and not one person's opinion is the be all, sort of opinion. It's like anything in life, as long as it's done in a respectful sort of ethical way, then I don't see too many problems with it.
Yeah, I'm probably very similar stance, like up north and in like all through the Cape and stuff like that, where you've got calves and cattle and stuff missing ears and tails, and you hear about high levels of stock loss, and you're seeing mobs of 5, 7, 10 dogs sometimes. Then that's the numbers then need to be controlled. When you're talking about down where I was, when I got the cool video, I've had a couple of interactions with dingoes down here, and the area that I've seen them in every time, all the property owners know that they're around, but they've never really experienced, like all of them, like there's a couple of sheep farmers and everything, and they've all never said that they've ever lost or thought that they've had like a problem dog or lost calves or lambs or sheep or anything like that to dogs. And so they're aware that they're there, but they've never expressed a problem, and hence, when I've talked to them about it and said, well, what do you want me to do? They're like, oh, well, it's sort of up to you. And to be honest, the 2 times that I've seen dogs, the first time was the encounter when I filmed filmed 2 sows eating a kangaroo, which I assume the dingo had killed, had a big feed, and sort of the pigs had come in. And I mean, to be honest, the dingo I think it was just allowing them to eat its kill, because if it was really wanted to, like it was a big, I don't know if it was a male or a female, but it was a big, healthy dog, like a lot different to the very slim sort of open plains dogs of up north. I guess this was almost like a mountain boar equivalent of like a Cape York boar. Like this thing was thick, muscly, and like honestly beautiful. Like it was really, really impressive to see. And I got into about 30 meters and the wind changed, and I probably would have more shot it off, I guess, like instinct. As it was like up there, it's very much like the dogs need to be managed. Whereas down here, I can honestly say like I wasn't really upset that it winded me and ran away. And I actually had another encounter not too long later with a dog where it actually, I saw it up on a dam bank in some pretty thick bush, and I actually had some pigs right in front of me at like 15 meters, like a heap of sort of 30, 40 kilo pigs and a couple of piglets and stuff. And I had the camera on my hip and the bow on my shoulder, and it was a decision which one I was going to reach for. And I actually went for the camera thinking that, you know, if the dog was going to go down there and hunt some pigs, it was going to be a really cool experience and something I'll probably remember a lot more than just shooting another dog. And so, I actually went to film it, and I don't know what happened, but the dog ran down off the bank, and I heard the pigs came all trotting past me at about 10 meters. And then that was sort of it, and the dog never reappeared. So, sort of missed out on that one, but it was cool just seeing them. And I think, like what Ayden was saying, working in with property owners where if they want them gone, then I'd suggest, you know, as long as it's legal to do that. If they're okay with them, then, you know, and you want them, it's a decision up to you. And I don't think it's right or wrong either way.
The next question that we have had sent in is by Lachlan McDonald. He says, "G'day boys. When do you think the bucks come back to where they rut the previous year and set up their scrapes? Is it March or early April? Also recently saw 2 does and a younger buck together running away. What does that mean? Cheers, boys."
Well, I think the fact that they're running away probably means that you're scared of, mate. No, I'm just... So, I think if they're running away from you, then they're running away from you. You're probably walking too quickly would be my assumption. If they're just piss fighting around and playing, then, you know, it's probably the young bucks coming in, starting to, you know, feel the oats in the waters and get in there, and you know, the testosterone levels are rising. When do the bucks actually come in? Very much depends on the location and the maturity of the bucks. So a lot of the younger bucks will sort of almost never leave and or come in early. The older bucks will come in later than the younger bucks, and they'll start touching up their scrapes. But like you almost get this period where it's a bit frustrating, where you know, just say in the Hunter Valley, where they might start croaking in cool mornings. So, you know, from the middle of March on high density places, you might start hearing croaking. For a lot of places, it's more April, middle of April. But you get this period where the bucks will be there. They'll be, you know, building up their neck muscles, doing rubs, touching up their scrapes, but they're not actually croaking, and they're not, you know, they're just cruising around looking for girls that are coming into the scrapes, but they're not making all the noise yet. And that's actually a really good period to rattle, because that's when the boys are sort of sizing each other up as well before the rut fully kicks off. So, it very much is location dependent. But what I would say is go from, like, if you think that the peak rut in your area is, you know, just say the 15th of April, then I would say a month before that is when the boys start rocking up, and probably 2 weeks before that is when the bigger fellas are starting to rock up. But it just depends. Like, you get them at different, there's no hard and fast rule here, but just a rough guide, I'd sort of say.
I would agree with James in the sense that I think, say your peak rut is 15th of April, that by 15th of March, you're starting to get bucks on the scene. What I would say is that I don't necessarily agree that the bigger bucks turn up later. I would say that they're probably there at similar times, but they're more nocturnal. They're more probably establishing their scrapes of a night time. They're less likely to go and change their sort of secretive behaviour and start acting a bit ruddy and dumb like some of these younger bucks. So some of these younger bucks, as James said, probably never leave the does, and they're the first ones there because they have to travel the least. And same thing, they're smelling the slightest sniff of an estrus doe, and they're like, oh yeah, cool, there's something going on. Whereas those big bucks, they're sort of sitting there waiting for the main event. They're strengthening their neck muscles. And what I'd say to this is one of the best ways to achieve knowing this information and making sure that it's specific to your area, because we can go and say, 15th of March if they rut it, mid-April, that it's a month before. But in true honesty, it depends completely on where you are. Your property might be different depending on density of deer, hunting pressure, thick bush, open paddocks, whatever it may be. So I would really encourage you to, if you know where the scrapes are and you've got like a sort of rutting stand or a bench that has all the rut scrapes every year, then what I would do is, 2-3 months, say in end of January when these bucks are going to start stripping their velvet, you might have a buck there for 3 months before the rut that you don't even know about if you haven't got a trail camera out, or if you're not actively walking that ridge and glassing, the valleys and hunting your property. So what I would say is don't leave it until the rut or a week or two before the rut to think, oh, the bucks are going to move in now. They could very well be there as soon as some of those boys start stripping their velvet, leaving their bachelor mobs, strengthening their neck muscles. And he could be a buck that sits in his scrape nearly every single night for a month leading up to the rut. It's just that he's not calling, not vocalizing, and he's mostly nocturnal, just feeding on a little bit of green pasture or something in a tucked away little gully or corner. And this, I only say this because a few years ago, we filmed a series called Fallow Frenzy with Nick Morton down on one of his blocks in the Hunter Valley. And we had this amazing buck that we called Uno because he had a snapped antler the previous year and only had one main palm. We passed him up, and the next year he turned into this beast. But same thing, we got hundreds of trail cam photos of him on his scrape from early March, and we tried to hunt him in April. But he was in that area for a month, and we didn't really lay eyes on him in the flesh until the rut actually started. So sometimes even knowing that they're in the area doesn't help if they're a secretive old buck. And like we assumed that he was quite mature. When we saw him and passed him up the previous year, he was probably like a 230 sort of score buck, which is amazing in most places. The next year he was probably bigger again, having both antlers and a bit more mass and age and everything like that. But it just goes to show that, this is a great question because it gets you thinking, but there is no true accurate answer when you consider that there are so many other factors, such as region, density of animals, density of deer there, density of thick like bush and stuff like that where the bucks can hide, and all these sort of factors. So you're going to get a different answer depending on who you are and where you're hunting. But thank you very much, Lachlan, for sending that question in. Hopefully some of that discussion sort of helps get the ball rolling and you thinking. But good luck for the rut. It is upcoming for most people as you're hearing this. We're about to kick off April, which should mean that the fallow are starting to get into the swing of things and letting out a few croaks across the gullies. Alrighty, that wraps up today's podcast, legends. We are set to release our next series over on YouTube in the next week or two. So as we finish our bow hunting the rut series, I really encourage everyone to stick it out and watch these last couple of episodes. One of the best episodes that we recorded was actually filming our father, Nick Doumtsis, one of the show favourites. Everyone really sends in heaps of feedback whenever Dad's either on the videos or on the podcast. Everyone really gives him plenty of encouragement, and we definitely get a lot of feedback saying, hang out with your dad more, he's a legend. So he is going to be hunting fallow deer and reds, but he does come across a few boars and billy goats as well in the hills here in New South Wales. So we've got about a 15 to 20 minute episode which concludes that series. And then carrying on with the momentum, we actually head over to Cayuga Adventures in Cape York, North Queensland, where James, Dad and I also hunt Tusky Cape York boars. So join us over there on the YouTube. That next series sort of kicks off mid-April, where we're basically hunting tight creeks, plenty of water holes, looking for food sources as the conditions dry up towards the end of the dry season. As always, over on the YouTube channel, a new episode will be dropping every Wednesday evening from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on the Twin Elements YouTube channel. Please make sure that you guys continue to like the videos, comment on the videos, and subscribe to the channel to show your support and help us grow. Plus, in very, very exciting news, we also offer YouTube memberships. So there's a few different levels there, but what we are doing just to encourage people to sign up is For as little as a cup of coffee a month, you guys can support us. And basically, again, with these different varying levels of membership, what we're going to be doing in the future is live Q&As. So say there's 20 members that are of a silver, membership status or a gold membership status. Basically, for a silver membership, it costs a little bit more than a bronze, obviously. It's all scaled. But every month we're going to do a live Q&A where, similar to this podcast, for an hour, 2 hours on a designated night of the month, we're going to chat to you guys. And if it's 10 members, then it's basically a 1-on-10 sort of forum where you guys can talk to us about your properties, ask us any questions you want. It can be literally just like mates catching up if you like. But that's something we're going to do monthly. The other thing is that as part of these benefits, we're going to be doing monthly giveaways where, for the first giveaway, we're going to give away like an option site. There's going to be lower boots up for grabs, dog and gun coffee bundles, Twin Elements prints, all these different things, as well as you scale through these memberships, there's different benefits and rewards. So please go over and check those out. We have got different levels because we understand everyone is of different circumstances. But again, at the moment, for as little as a cup of coffee, you can get early access to all of our videos. As we create them, we basically schedule them. So if you're not a member, you'll have to wait for many, many weeks in some instances. But if you are a member, in as little as a couple of days of hearing this podcast, you can be watching Cayuga Adventures and us hunting Cape York boars in North Queensland. So we just wanted to let you know that service is on offer.
Well, that wraps up the podcast, legends. If you've got to this point, you're clearly one of our favorites, and we really appreciate your support here. As always, please share it with a mate. Hopefully a few of you legends are getting out in the field at the moment, and you're into hunting camp. So, if you're successful this rut, and they say, "Oh, where'd you learn all your tips and tricks?" "Oh, it was the Twin Elements podcast." Maybe share it around with a few of those people, and get them caught up to speed on everything that we share here, as well as the YouTube channel. So please make sure to subscribe across all the platforms. Please like and comment here at the podcast because it just shares it amongst other people and elevates it in the, wherever you listen to your podcast. So please do that for us. And other than that, best of luck out there this rut, guys, and we'll catch you next week on the Twin Elements podcast.